What if everything you've been told about being single is wrong? What if the thing people pity you for is actually the thing that is quietly making you dangerous? Not dangerous in the way that hurts people. Dangerous in the way that builds empires. Dangerous in the way that creates legacies. Dangerous in the way that the greatest minds in human history, the philosophers, the warriors, the artists, the visionaries, understood something about solitude that the noise of modern culture has almost completely buried. Being single is not a waiting room. It is a weapon. And most people have no idea they're holding it. Introduction. Stay with me, because what I am about to share with you is going to completely reframe the way you see your relationship status. Not from a motivational, feel-good, everything happens for a reason place. But from a deep, philosophical, historically grounded place that the Stoics built their entire framework of excellence upon. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, these were not men who stumbled into greatness while distracted by the opinions of others. These were men who understood, with razor-sharp clarity, the extraordinary power of an undivided mind. An undivided life. An undivided self. And that is exactly what being single gives you, if you choose to use it. The key word is choose. Because being single is either a season of profound self-construction, or a season of slow, unconscious drift. The difference between the two is not luck. It is not circumstance. It is not whether the right person has shown up yet. The difference is philosophy. And that is what we are here to talk about. Point 1. Solitude is where greatness is built. Let me tell you about a young man named James. James was 29 years old, freshly out of a long relationship, and absolutely convinced that his life was falling apart. His friends were getting married. His social media feed was a relentless parade of engagement announcements and couple vacations. And James was alone on a Saturday night with a bowl of cereal and a sense of quiet dread. But James did something unusual that Saturday night. Instead of opening a dating app, he opened a book. Specifically, he opened Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And he read a line that stopped him completely. Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. He read it 3 times. And then he put the book down and asked himself, for the first time in years, a question so simple it was almost embarrassing. Who am I when no one is watching? He didn't have an answer. And that absence of an answer, that hollow space where a self should have been, told him everything he needed to know about how he had been spending his time. That Saturday night became the first night of the most transformative season of James's life. Not because he found a relationship, but because he finally stopped looking outside of himself for the one thing that could only ever be found within. Here is what the Stoics knew that modern culture desperately tries to sell you out of believing. Solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is the laboratory of the self. Every great thinker, every remarkable leader, every person who has ever built something worth building, they all had seasons of profound aloneness. Not accidental aloneness. Intentional aloneness. The kind where you sit with yourself long enough to hear what you actually think, want, believe, and are capable of. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire of millions, and he retreated into solitude every single morning to write, to think, to examine his own mind before allowing the world to make demands of it. Epictetus, a man who was literally owned by another human being, found in his inner solitude a freedom so complete, so unshakable, that his master could break his leg and not break his spirit. Seneca wrote letters to himself. Long, honest, probing letters. Not for publication. Not for applause. For the pure, rigorous practice of knowing his own mind. These men were not waiting for the right circumstances to begin their greatness. They were building it, in the silence. In the solitude. In the season that looked, from the outside, like nothing special was happening. Sound familiar? Point 2, your undivided attention is your most valuable asset. Here is something nobody puts on a motivational poster. Relationships are expensive. Not just financially, though that is real. But emotionally, mentally, energetically, a relationship is one of the most significant investments a human being makes. And like any investment, it requires constant attention, maintenance, and allocation of resources. When you are in a relationship, a portion of your mental bandwidth, every single day, is occupied. Thinking about them. Planning around them. Navigating their moods, their needs, their growth, their fears. Communicating. Compromising. Showing up. These are beautiful things. The Stoics did not dismiss love or partnership. Stoicism is not a philosophy of isolation. But they were honest about what divided attention costs. And here is what it costs, the depth of focus required to do something truly remarkable. Let me tell you about Elena. Elena was a graphic designer with a dream of building her own creative studio. For 3 years, she worked on this dream in the margins of a relationship that, while loving, required enormous amounts of her time and energy. Her partner needed her present. Needed her emotionally available. Needed her evenings, her weekends, her mental space. She gave those things gladly, because she loved him. But the studio stayed a dream. When the relationship ended, not dramatically, not bitterly, just honestly, Elena found herself alone for the first time in years. And in that aloneness, something remarkable happened. She had her evenings back. She had her weekends back. She had her mind back. Within 18 months, Elena had launched her studio, landed 3 major clients, and built something she had been trying to build for years while distracted. She didn't succeed because she stopped caring about love. She succeeded because, for one specific season, her attention was entirely, powerfully, undividedly her own. The Stoics called this prohairesis, the faculty of deliberate choice, of directing your will with intention and precision. And prohairesis, at its most potent, requires an undistracted mind. Your single season is giving you something extraordinarily rare in this loud, demanding, constantly connected world. The chance to aim your full self at what matters most to you. Do not waste it waiting for someone to share it with. Use it. Now. Completely. Point 3, you are being refined, not rejected. I need to speak directly to something that lives quietly in the hearts of most single people, and that is the feeling, however subtle, however well disguised, that being single means something is wrong with you. That you have been looked over. Passed by. Found lacking in some invisible but critical way. I want to dismantle that lie with everything I have. Because here is what the Stoics understood about difficulty, about seasons of apparent lack, about the times in life that feel like subtraction. The obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote it plainly, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He was not talking about dating. He was talking about life. But the principle applies with stunning precision. The season that feels like rejection is actually a season of refinement. Let me tell you about iron. Raw iron, pulled from the earth, is not particularly impressive. It is rough, impure, mixed with other elements that weaken it. It cannot build a bridge. It cannot form a blade. It cannot bear significant weight. But put that iron through fire, extreme, sustained, deliberate heat, and something extraordinary happens. The impurities burn away. The structure of the metal changes at a molecular level. What emerges from the fire is not the same material that went in. What emerges is steel. Stronger. Purer. Capable of things the raw iron could never have achieved. Your single season is the fire. And I know the fire is uncomfortable. I know it doesn't feel like a gift when you're in the middle of it. The Stoics did not pretend that difficulty felt pleasant. They simply insisted, with the confidence of people who had tested this repeatedly against the hardest circumstances imaginable, that difficulty serves the person who faces it with intention. Every moment you spend in this season becoming more self-aware, you are burning off impurity. Every boundary you learn to set, you are strengthening your structure. Every morning you rise and choose your values over your loneliness, you are being forged into something that no comfortable, distracted, half-attentive version of you could ever have become. You are not being rejected. You are being prepared. And what you are being prepared for, in love, in purpose, in the full expression of who you are capable of becoming, will require every bit of the steel you are building right now. Point 4. The relationship you build with yourself determines every other relationship. There is a conversation I want you to imagine. Two people sitting across from each other on a first date. Both nervous, both hopeful, both presenting their best and most carefully curated selves. One of them, let's call her Maya, has spent the last 2 years of her single season building something. She knows what she values. She knows what she will not compromise. She knows what lights her up and what drains her. She has sat with herself in silence long enough to be genuinely comfortable there. She has failed at things and learned from them. She has succeeded at things and remained grounded through them. She has a relationship with herself that is honest, warm, and unshakable. The other person across the table, let's call him David, has spent those same 2 years waiting. Scrolling. Comparing. Numbing. He doesn't know what he wants, exactly. He knows he doesn't want to be alone. He is charming and warm and perfectly pleasant. But beneath the surface, where the real conversations of a relationship eventually have to happen, there is an unexamined life. A self that has never been truly interrogated. Now, who do you think shows up better in that relationship? Not the one who was most eager. Not the one who had been single the shortest time. But the one who used their single season to build the most important relationship they will ever have. The relationship with themselves. Epictetus said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." And the single person who truly understands their secret weapon rejoices for what this season is giving them, the irreplaceable, foundational, life-defining gift of genuine self-knowledge. Because here is the truth that every great relationship is built on. You cannot give what you do not have. You cannot offer depth from shallowness. You cannot bring wholeness from brokenness. You cannot sustain real intimacy from a self that has never been examined. The work you do on yourself right now, in this season, in the silence, in the solitude, is not time spent waiting for your real life to begin. It is your real life. And it is also the greatest gift you will ever bring to the person who, when the time is right, deserves to meet the fullest, most refined, most genuinely powerful version of you. Closing of Part 1. We have covered powerful ground in this first part. We've established that solitude is not emptiness, it is the laboratory where greatness is assembled. We've talked about the extraordinary power of undivided attention and what becomes possible when your full self is aimed at your own growth. We've reframed the feeling of rejection as the process of refinement, the fire that builds steel. And we've grounded everything in the most important truth of all, the relationship you build with yourself right now determines the quality of every relationship you will ever have. There is a difference between carrying a weapon and knowing how to use it. A sword in the hands of someone who has never trained is just heavy metal. It slows you down. It confuses you. It may even hurt you more than it helps you. But a sword in the hands of someone who has trained, who has studied, practiced, fallen, risen, and refined their skill through deliberate repetition, that same sword becomes an extension of the person holding it. Precise. Powerful. Purposeful. In Part 1, we established that being single is your secret weapon. In Part 2, we are going to talk about how to actually wield it. Because the Stoics were never satisfied with theory alone. Philosophy, for them, was not an intellectual exercise. It was a lived practice. Something you did every single day, in the small moments, in the difficult moments, in the quiet moments when nobody was watching and the only thing standing between you and your highest self was your own willingness to choose it. So let's get to work. Stoic Practice 1, the Daily Examination. There was a man named Theodore who had a ritual. Every single night, without exception, before he allowed himself to sleep, Theodore sat at the edge of his bed and asked himself 3 questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short of the person I want to be? What will I do differently tomorrow? He had been doing this for 2 years. And the people around him, colleagues, friends, family, had started to notice something they couldn't quite name. There was a quality to Theodore that felt different from most people. A groundedness. A self-possession. A sense that he knew exactly who he was and exactly where he was going. They assumed it was confidence. It wasn't confidence. It was clarity. And clarity, the Stoics taught, is the product of relentless, honest self-examination. Seneca wrote, "I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." He did this every night. Not as an act of self-punishment. Not as a spiral of regret. But as the disciplined practice of a person committed to becoming better, one day, one examination, one honest reckoning at a time. This is your first Stoic practice for wielding your single season as a weapon. The daily examination. Every night, before the phone, before the distraction, before sleep, sit with yourself. Ask the 3 questions. Write them down if you can. Be honest. Be specific. Be compassionate but do not be soft. Because here is what the daily examination does over time, and this is the part that will change your life if you let it. It makes you impossible to fool. Not just by others. By yourself. Most people drift through life half asleep to their own patterns. They repeat the same mistakes in different costumes. They attract the same dynamics with different faces. They wonder why nothing changes when everything changes around them. The person who examines themselves daily does not drift. They steer. And a person who can steer their own life, who knows their patterns, their triggers, their strengths, their growing edges, that person does not arrive at love, or at purpose, or at any significant chapter of their life by accident. They arrive intentionally. And intentional arrivals change everything. Stoic practice 2, voluntary discomfort. I want to tell you about something the Stoics practice that will sound, at first, completely counterintuitive. They deliberately made themselves uncomfortable. Not in a punishing way. Not in a self-destructive way. But in a calculated, purposeful way that they called ascesis, a Greek word meaning disciplined practice or training. Seneca would periodically eat simple food, wear plain clothing, and live as though he had very little, even though he was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. Not because he was pretending to be poor. But because he wanted to know, with absolute certainty, that his peace did not depend on his comfort. That if everything he had was taken away, he would still be standing. Still himself. Still capable of choosing wisdom over despair. Marcus Aurelius would wake before dawn. Sleep on a hard surface. Deny himself pleasures that were readily available to him as emperor. Why? Because they understood something that soft, comfortable, constantly entertained modern culture has almost completely forgotten. The person who is afraid of discomfort is controlled by discomfort. And the person who is controlled by discomfort, who cannot sit alone without reaching for a distraction, who cannot face a difficult emotion without numbing it, who cannot tolerate the silence of their own company, that person is not free. They are a prisoner of their own avoidance. Your single season will offer you discomfort. Count on it. The quiet Friday nights. The weddings attended alone. The moments when loneliness lands not as a gentle sadness but as a sharp, specific ache. Do not run from those moments. Sit in them. Not indefinitely. Not masochistically. But long enough to discover something extraordinary, that you can survive them. That the discomfort does not kill you. That on the other side of sitting with it, rather than escaping it, you find a quality of inner strength that no comfortable life can ever produce. There was a young woman named Priya who decided, during her single season, to do one uncomfortable thing every week. Nothing dramatic. One week she ate at a restaurant alone, something that had always terrified her. One week she went to a movie by herself. One week she took a solo trip to a city she'd never visited, navigated it entirely alone, and sat in a cafe in a foreign place with nothing but her own thoughts for company. Each time, the discomfort was real. Each time, she survived it. And each time, something quietly expanded inside her. A tolerance. A confidence. A bone-deep knowledge that she was capable of more than she had previously believed. By the end of that year, Priya had done things, professional risks, creative leaps, difficult conversations, that the version of herself at the beginning of the year would have found unthinkable. Not because her circumstances had changed. Because she had trained herself to be unafraid of discomfort. That is your weapon being sharpened. Stoic Practice 3, define your values before someone else does. Here is a question I want you to sit with seriously. If you had to write down, right now, the 5 core values that govern your life, could you do it? Not the values you think you should have. Not the values that would sound impressive to someone else. Your actual values. The principles that, when violated, make you feel genuinely unsettled. The standards that, when honored, make you feel genuinely at peace. Could you write them down? Most people cannot. And the reason most people cannot is not because they are shallow or unthinking. It is because they have never been required to. Because there has always been someone else, a partner, a family, a social group, a relationship dynamic, providing the values by default. Providing the structure. Filling in the blank where personal conviction should live. The single season, used intentionally, is the season where you fill in that blank yourself. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Gabriel spent most of his 20s moving from relationship to relationship, each one shaping him in subtle ways, his tastes, his habits, his opinions, his sense of what a good life looked like. He was a genuinely good person. But if you had asked him, at 28, who he was apart from the people he had loved, he would have struggled to answer. Then came a 2-year season of singleness. Unexpected. Uncomfortable. Ultimately, transformative. In that season, Gabriel did the work that no one had ever pushed him to do. He read. He journaled. He sat with difficult questions. He figured out what he actually believed about work, about money, about family, about faith, about what kind of man he wanted to be. He wrote down his values. Rewrote them. Crossed things out. Tested them against his actual choices and found where they were inconsistent. He emerged from that season not as a man who had waited 2 years for his life to begin, but as a man who knew, with unusual precision and depth, exactly who he was. And when he eventually entered his next relationship, the one he would build his life around, he did not arrive as someone looking to be defined. He arrived already defined. And the difference that made, to the relationship, to the woman he loved, to the life they built together, was immeasurable. The Stoics called this virtue, and they considered it the only true good. Not pleasure. Not wealth. Not status. Not even love, in the romantic sense. Virtue. Character. The deep, settled, self-authored quality of a person who knows what they stand for. Your single season is your greatest opportunity to build that. Do not outsource it to the next relationship. Build it now. Here. In this season. In the silence. In the examination. In the voluntary discomfort. In the honest, rigorous, deeply personal work of figuring out who you actually are and what you actually stand for. Because the person who arrives at love already knowing their values does not lose themselves in it. They bring themselves to it. And that is the difference between a relationship that diminishes you and a relationship that expands you. Stoic Practice 4, Memento Mori, the urgency of now. The Stoics had a practice that sounds dark on the surface but is, in practice, one of the most life-giving disciplines ever conceived. They called it Memento Mori. Remember that you will die. Not as a morbid fixation. Not as a reason for despair. But as a tool, a clarifying, focusing, urgency-creating tool, for living the present moment with full intention. Marcus Aurelius returned to this theme again and again in his meditations. He would remind himself, the most powerful man in the world, that his time was finite. That the hours were passing. That the person he intended to become had to be built now, not someday, not when conditions were perfect, not when the right relationship arrived. Now. And I want to bring this into your single season with a directness that I hope lands clearly. This season will not last forever. Which means the growth available in it, the self-knowledge, the undivided focus, the refinement, the steel building, is available to you for a limited time only. Every day you spend in passive waiting is a day of that irreplaceable resource spent on nothing. Every morning you wake up and choose distraction over development is a morning of your single season, one of the most powerful seasons of your entire life, used for something that will not matter in 5 years. The Stoics would ask you, with genuine urgency, with the love of a philosophy that wants the best for your one wild and precious life. What are you doing with today? Not tomorrow. Not when motivation strikes. Not when you feel ready. Today. There was a woman named Josephine who spent 3 years of her single season genuinely waiting. Waiting for the relationship that would give her permission to be happy. Waiting for the circumstances that would make starting her business feel less risky. Waiting for the morning she would wake up and feel ready to become who she had always imagined she could be. The morning never came. Not because she wasn't capable. But because readiness is not a feeling that arrives. It is a decision that is made. On the day she finally made that decision, on the ordinary Tuesday morning when she looked at herself in the mirror and said, out loud, I am not waiting anymore, everything began to change. Not because the world changed. Because she decided to stop giving her now to the fantasy of a perfect later. Memento mori. Your time is finite. Your season is real. Your potential is extraordinary. Use today. The arrival, what you are building toward. I promised you in part 1 that we would talk about eudaimonia. The word is Greek, and it has been loosely translated as happiness, but that translation does it a deep injustice. Happiness is a feeling. Feelings come and go. Happiness depends on circumstances, on luck, on the behavior of other people and the cooperation of the world around you. Eudaimonia is something else entirely. It is more accurately translated as human flourishing. The full, active, expansive expression of your highest capacities. The state of a person who is living in complete alignment with their values, their purpose, their authentic self. The Stoics taught that eudaimonia is not given to you by a relationship. It is not produced by a partner, a marriage, a family, or any external circumstance whatsoever. It is built from the inside out. In exactly the kind of deliberate, examined, intentional season we have been describing throughout this entire conversation. And here is the extraordinary thing about a person who has achieved eudaimonia, who has done the work, built the self, defined the values, trained through the discomfort, examined the daily life with honesty and courage. When they enter a relationship, they do not need it in the desperate, consuming, identity-threatening way that unexamined people need it. They choose it. From a place of wholeness. From a place of self-knowledge. From a place of strength. And love chosen from strength, love offered by a complete person to another complete person, is a different thing entirely from love grasped at from emptiness. It is steadier. Deeper. More honest. More free. The Stoics believe that the greatest gift you can bring to any relationship, to any endeavor, to any chapter of your life, is a self that has been genuinely worked on. A character that has been genuinely built. Your single season is not the pause before your real life. It is the forge where your real life is being made. Short story, The Arrow and the Bow. There is an image I want to leave you with. Think of an arrow being drawn back in a bow. In that moment, the moment just before release, everything looks like stillness. Like waiting. Like nothing is happening. But something extraordinary is happening. Potential energy is being stored. Tension is being built. The bow is bending, and in that bending, power is accumulating that simply cannot exist in a relaxed string. The arrow does not fly far because it was released quickly. The arrow flies far because it was drawn back deeply. Your single season is the drawing back. Every morning you spend building yourself, every examination, every discomfort faced, every value clarified, every room of your inner life reclaimed and furnished with intention, you are being drawn back. And when the time comes, when the right moment, the right purpose, the right person, the right chapter arrives, you will not drift into it. You will fly into it. With the accumulated power of every single day you chose growth over waiting. Every day you chose yourself over distraction. Every day you treated your single season not as a problem to be solved, but as a weapon to be wielded. Draw back deeply. The release will be worth. If this conversation has shifted something in you, if you are walking away from this with even one new thought about what your single season is actually for, then something important has happened here today. Don't let it slip by. And if you want more of this, if you want to keep going deeper into the philosophy, the stories, the honest and life-changing conversations that actually move the needle, then there is one thing I need you to do right now. Subscribe to the Stoic Path. This is not just a channel. This is a community of people who are serious about understanding themselves. Who are done with surface-level inspiration and ready for the kind of wisdom that actually builds lives. Who believe, as the Stoics believed, that the examined life is not just worth living. This is the Stoic Path. And you, exactly as you are, right now, in this season, are exactly where you need to be.